People think they know how cowboys carried their guns, but most of that comes from movies and not real life. Frontier demanded practical choices, not dramatic poses. Gun had to stay secure, stay clear, and stay ready only when danger appeared. These are the real ways cowboys actually carried their guns in the Wild West. Number 10, the pommel holster. A cowboy who spent most of his life on horseback didn't want a heavy revolver beating into his hip every time the horse moved. Early pistols were heavy enough to make even short rides uncomfortable. That's why many riders placed their guns on the saddle instead of carrying them on their bodies. The pommel holster sat near the saddle horn, holding the gun steady even in rough terrain, kept the weight off the rider's hips, which saved a lot of pain during long days. This carry method made sense for large pistols that were too heavy to wear all day. The holster sometimes had wool lining to protect the gun from constant rubbing. Some versions had flaps to keep out dust and rain. Everything about it focused on function, not looks. Cowboy needed to handle reins, ropes, and livestock without a pistol dragging him down, but the saddle did the heavy work. The rider could lean forward and draw the pistol with one clean motion. It didn't offer fast speed, but it offered comfort and access. Cowboy needed the gun, he needed it steady, dry, and ready. As guns became lighter, some men shifted to belt holsters, but many still trusted the pommel holster for long travel. It handled weight better than any belt ever could. Number 9, hidden guns in town. Most people imagine cowboys walking through town with guns hanging off their belts, but most frontier towns had strict rules that banned open carry. Anyone entering places like Tombstone or Dodge City had to hand over their firearm at a hotel desk, a stable, or directly to the sheriff. These towns needed order, not trouble. Merchants didn't want fights in front of their shops. Saloons didn't want drunk men waving guns, and lawmen didn't want a street full of armed strangers. Because of these rules, many men carried small pistols hidden under coats or inside vests. These were backup weapons, not displays of strength. A small derringer could disappear into a pocket. A compact revolver could fit behind a belt or inside a boot. Men did this quietly because no one wanted attention from the law. Kept your weapon close because travel was dangerous, but you kept it hidden because the town demanded calm. Shootouts usually happen outside town limits for this reason. A man might argue inside a saloon, but he waited until stepping past the line where the ordinance is stopped. This simple truth breaks nearly every movie scene ever filmed. The image of two men walking openly armed through a busy street was uncommon. Reality cared more about safety and rules. Cinema cared about dramatic moments. Number 8, women and hidden guns. Women on the frontier often carried weapons, but they carried them in ways that stayed out of sight. They had to travel, work, and deal with strangers the same way men did, but with even more reasons to stay prepared. A hidden firearm was not for show. It was a quiet safety measure made to protect against danger that could appear without warning. Derringers became a popular choice because they were small, light, and easy to hide in everyday clothing. A woman could carry one in a purse, a shawl, or a pocket without drawing attention. Some women hid pistols in corsets or garters. Others sewed private pockets into their skirts. Ranch wives traveling alone sometimes kept larger revolvers under riding coats. Saloon owners kept pistols behind counters. Gamblers kept them near winnings. These carry methods weren't dramatic, but they were effective. A hidden gun gave a woman control in situations where she had little support, allowed her to move through rough environments without appearing afraid or unprepared. This side of the West rarely appears in films, but it was real and common. Women understood danger clearly, and they responded with smart, quiet preparation. Number 7, the cross draw. The cross draw holster became a favorite among cowboys because long hours in the saddle made a gun on the dominant hip a problem. Revolver would hit the leg again and again, leaving bruises or rubbing skin raw. Cross draw placed the holster on the opposite side, angled forward so the rider could reach across the body and pull the gun without twisting. This position let the rider keep control of the reins or ropes while still having access to the weapon. It also kept the gun from rubbing the thigh. Scouts liked it. Stage drivers trusted it. Lawmen who traveled long distances used it because it kept movement smooth and predictable. The cross draw wasn't built for speed. It was built for long rides and steady handling. A man could sit for hours without the gun digging into his side. When he needed to draw, the revolver came out clean and without extra motion. That small detail often mattered more than speed, especially in the late 1800s when most armed men spent far more time riding, guarding, or traveling than reacting to sudden gunfights. A man knew he'd spend 10 hours in a saddle. Why would he choose a holster that punished his body when he could switch to a position that made riding easier and drawing safer? Number 6, the fast draw myth. No scene is more famous in movie westerns than two men standing in the street waiting to see who reaches for their gun first. It looks exciting, but it does not match the real West at all. Real holsters rode high on the belt, covered the trigger guard fully, and held the gun tight. These holsters were designed for safety and stability, not speed. Real fights happened fast, messy, and often without warning. Many men who died in gunfights never even pulled their guns. There were no rules, no set distance, and no dramatic pauses. A man reached for his pistol only when he had no other choice. The fast draw idea came many years later from show performers and movie productions. It looked good on camera, so it became a standard image. The cowboys didn't practice fast draws. They practiced hitting what they aimed at. They practiced calm handling. They practiced keeping their guns clean. A fast draw without accuracy did nothing. A steady hand meant everything. Movies turned the West into a stage. Real West valued survival over style. Before we move to the next, subscribe for more real Wild West gun facts, real carry positions, and the ways cowboys actually handled weapons. Number 5, the high ride holster. The high ride holster was one of the most common ways cowboys carried their revolvers. Even though movies rarely show it, the holster sat high on the belt, close to the ribs, keeping the gun tight against the body. Placement kept the revolver from slapping the leg or catching on a saddle horn during rough riding. Anyone who worked cattle, climbed fences, or rode through brush understood how important that was. The gun's grip stayed easy to reach without the pistol hanging low. A simple leather strap over the hammer kept it in place. Cowboys didn't want a heavy revolver moving around while they worked. A snug high fit kept the weapon steady even when the horse jumped, turned sharply, or ran across rocky ground. It wasn't meant for speed, it was meant for safety. Cowboy cared more about keeping the gun where it belonged than drawing it in a split second. Fully loaded Colt 45 weighed a lot, and a long day in the saddle could feel longer if the revolver dragged down the belt. That weight needed support, and a high placement helped by resting closer to the body's center. This way, cowboys kept the gun from swinging when running or riding fast. Cowboy needed to draw, the angle offered a clean pull without extra motion. The high ride holster proved reliable across different jobs. Lawmen liked it for visibility, ranch hands liked it for comfort, scouts liked it because it stayed out of the way. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. That was all a cowboy cared about. Number 4, rifles stored on the saddle. When most people think of cowboys, they picture revolvers first, but rifles played a far bigger role in the frontier. Revolver was a backup. A rifle was the main tool for hunting and defense. Cowboys kept rifles in saddle scabbards, not on their backs the way the movies loved to show. A back carry was uncomfortable, unsafe, and difficult to reach. The saddle scabbard solved every problem. The scabbard sat on the right side of the saddle, angled forward. The butt pointed backward, so the cowboy could reach down and pull the rifle out in one smooth motion. Heavy leather protected the weapon from dust, rain, and constant movement. It also kept the rider safe from accidental hits against the sharp edges or hard parts of the gun. This position kept the rifle balanced with the horse's movement, so the rider didn't feel constant shifting. It also prevented the long gun from catching on brush, branches, or gate posts. Cowboys weren't walking around with rifles slung across their shoulders. They needed their arms free for reins, ropes, or tools. Ranchers carried rifles in scabbards for protection against predators and rustlers. Stage drivers carried shotguns in similar rigs, and scouts kept repeaters for long-distance travel. This method allowed a rider to move fast, stop suddenly, or dismount without the rifle becoming a problem. It stayed safe until the moment it needed to be used. Rifles in saddle scabbards may not be dramatic, but they represent the real West better than any slow-motion draw ever filmed. Number 3, lawmen and outlaws. Movies try to draw a clear line between lawmen and outlaws, but on the frontier, the differences were rarely neat. Both groups carried guns, both groups understood danger. Both groups respected how fast life could change. What separated them was purpose, not hardware. Lawmen carried their guns where people could see them. The gun reminded everyone that the law stood in front of them. The sheriff or deputy often used a high belt, a cross draw, or sometimes a forward-tilted position that made drawing easier. These holsters were simple and built for daily use. They were meant to look steady and dependable, not stylish. The lawman didn't hide his authority. He let the gun speak before he even opened his mouth. The outlaws carried guns in the opposite way. They kept pistols hidden because surprise mattered more than display. Visible gun in town drew too much attention. Hidden pistols gave a man space to move without raising alarms. A single outlaw might carry 2 or 3 guns placed in different locations, one in a coat, one in a boot, one in a sash or shoulder holster. They relied on sudden movement and quick advantage. Both sides lived by the same truth, however. A gun wasn't for show. A man who showed off his weapon made himself a target. A man who treated it with caution often lived longer. Number 2, Hollywood fast draw rig. The low-slung holster seen in movies with the belt sitting on the thigh and the gun hanging low for a dramatic fast draw didn't exist in the actual West. This style came decades later, built by movie studios and trick shooters in the early 1900s. Looked impressive, which is why it became famous, but no working cowboy used it. Real gun belts rode higher. Real holsters covered the trigger guard. The drop loop style in films allowed quick pulling but offered poor control and very little security. On the frontier, riders dealt with wind, dust, mud, heavy movement, and unpredictable weather. A loose holster would not survive conditions like that. It would move too much, bounce, or pick up debris. Movie stars practiced fast draws because the camera loved it. Real cowboys cared more about their horses, their cattle, and the long distances they had to travel. Drawing fast meant nothing if the shot missed. The man who acted too eager with his gun earned a reputation that followed him in every town he entered. This movie invention grew so popular that people assumed it came from real life. But the truth never matched the legend. Cowboys needed control, not speed. They needed safety, not flash. They needed a revolver that stayed in place through storms, dust, and sudden rides. Number 1, most cowboys didn't carry. For all the talk about cowboys and guns, the surprising truth is simple. Cowboys didn't carry a gun at all. They had long days filled filled with real work, not dramatic showdowns. Gun added weight, slowed movement, rubbed against the body during rides. Cowboy cared far more about a good horse, strong tack, and reliable tools than a revolver he might not need for weeks. Some carried guns when traveling through places known for danger. Others kept pistols in saddlebags or wrapped in cloth at camp. Cowboy didn't want trouble, he wanted work. A man who looked eager for a fight became a problem, not a hero. Employers avoided that kind of person. Trouble followed him too easily. Carrying a gun daily was uncommon. Carrying one smartly was normal. Cowboy didn't rest his hand on the grip or pose for dramatic effect, kept the revolver out of sight unless there was a true need. If real cowboys valued calm behavior, steady work, and safety, why does the world still imagine them as gunslingers when that lifestyle belonged to only a tiny part of the entire frontier population? The real West didn't care about fantasy, cared about what kept people alive. Cowboys carried guns in ways that worked, not in ways that looked impressive on film. These 10 methods show how far movies twisted the truth. Real frontier belonged to people who moved with purpose, stayed sharp, and acted only when the moment demanded it. If you want more videos on guns from the past, hit like and subscribe, because this is where you get the West without filters.